Back here on HQ, UFC 326 is upon us from Las Vegas. We got a top 10 ranked middleweight matchup. The co-main event where Caio Borralho taking on Reinier de Ridder. Borralho suffered his first defeat in a decade in his last appearance after busting onto the scene in 2022 and ripping off 7 straight wins. RDR also looking to get back in the win column after a pretty shocking loss to Brendan Allen in his last outing where RDR didn't get off the stool. People calling him a quitter, so he's looking to redeem himself as well. It is all going down March 7th on CBS and Paramount Plus. Let's welcome in Brian Campbell to break down this fight. And we are starting off with Borralho's identity as a fighter, somebody who is predominantly a grappler now, but great at striking as well. So break that down for us, BC.
Yeah, Borralho, 33 years old, out of Brazil, started by studying jiu-jitsu, judo, and really working on his ground game, which is typically the foundation and base of so many great Brazilian fighters in history. But to give him credit, it has really been the evolution of his striking game and the ability to use striking to set up his takedowns that has made him one of the top middleweights in the world at this point. He won back-to-back Dana White Contender Series fights in 2021 to get a ton of attention, and then back that up with what you mentioned, a 7-fight win streak that literally put him in legitimate title contention. Even though he's coming off of his first loss, a very competitive fight against Nassourdine Imavov last fall, what Borralho does so well is control the terms of the fights. He's nimble on his feet. He bounces around. He's difficult from that southpaw stance because of the accuracy of his punches and his ability to take you down. But on the flip side, for a fighter with very eye-catching neck tattoos and a fighter who is part of a gym like the Fighting Nerds, which has a reputation for all action, he's a much more reserved counter striker, a much more of a technician. And that has really been the key to his success here. He stops 76% of takedowns, so he's able to keep the fight on the feet if he needs to. He lands nearly 50% of his own takedowns. And really, as you see there, the significant strike defense, his ability to hit and not get hit is ultimately what makes him so elite. He doesn't put himself in dangerous positions. He controls range so well. And at 33, he's really at the peak of his powers right now, needing, of course, to bounce back from this loss. But I do believe he learned a lot in that fight against Imavov, who very well could be the next title challenger in this division.
And we're going to talk more about the Fighting Nerds in just a moment. But before that, I want to talk about something you mentioned, BC, the evolution for Borralho in that striking game. So is that really how he's been able to wear down his opponents and really have this slow burn because he's got more in his arsenal?
For sure. His ability to pick his opponents apart, not rush, and look to get the early knockout has really allowed him to really wear down his foes, set them up for the takedown, and in some cases, the eventual submission finish. But he's a very consistent fighter who can get finishes, but he does it very meticulously. Look, he's got so many offensive weapons, but so much of that is built upon his patience, his timing, his thoughtfulness. He doesn't put himself, like I mentioned, in firing range too often. He doesn't get hit that cleanly, but his ability to stay the course, carry out a game plan has been a big deal. Look, he came up, he knocked off some tough names, but when he got up to the highest level of this division in August of 2024 and took on former title challenger Jared Cannonier, that was the fight that was the ultimate test of Borralho as a technician, as a craftsman. He was able to rely on his technique and skills to get a clean, unanimous decision over 5 rounds and truly place himself upon the elite in this division.
Let's get back to the Fighting Nerds, VC, because as you mentioned, Borralho is part of this group. We still have some new UFC viewers, right? Because it's this new era with Paramount on CBS. So kind of introduce us. What are the Fighting Nerds? Explain it to us like we're 5, their mentality, and then what Borralho brings and means to this group.
Look, it's one of the best up-and-coming gyms on the planet right now in mixed martial arts out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And, of course, the thing that jumps out at you is the celebratory interviews after their victories when Fighting Nerds members put on the black rim glasses with the white tape in the middle and sort of celebrate their outlandish personality. What do we know about Fighting Nerds fighters? Typically, they're savage in a good way, aggressive. They go after it. When you look at the roster of fighters over the past 2 years who had that jump through your screen and become instant contenders in their own division. It's a who's who. There's really a four-pack we're talking about. Caio Borralho, Carlos Prates, who's climbing the ladder so quickly at welterweight, Lord John Silva, who has won very big fights at featherweight in recent years, and Mauricio Hufi, who back at UFC 325 bounced back in a big way following his first defeat. You've also got Bruno Brazil, Michał Oleksiejczuk, and it's a gym that has built this identity that they live free. There's joy that they bring to the table, and their celebrations and post-fight interviews, but you better believe they're also doggedly tough. And in Borralho's standpoint, who has really become, Caio, the leader of the Fighting Nerds, the brains, the captain of the operation. He is the one that is the most refined of all of the fighters. And really, they've created this identity that, you know, if a Fighting Nerds member is going to be in a big fight, you're going to get aggression, you're going to get high-level skill, and you're going to get fighters that will do what it takes to get that victory.
Oh, I love talking about the Fighting Nerds. It pumps me up, BC. All right, let's talk more about this matchup because, of course, Borralho is going up against RDR, who is an elite grappler in his own right. Also somebody who is probably desperately trying to get back in the win column after his last outing and what happened there. So whose grappling ultimately prevails?
I think it's going to be Borralho, and it may not even be because of the grappling. Look, I mentioned that takedown defense, so stingy, 76%. Borralho is just a better, cleaner striker than RDR all across the board, and his ability to keep this fight potentially away from the danger zones where the Dutch Knight has most of his success, which is through jiu-jitsu, through using those long limbs to set you up for the submissions. The more Borralho can keep the fight on the ground, he just has, with that southpaw counterpunching style, a much more consistent, accurate way to land big strikes. De Ridder is 6'4". He's a bit of a wild card, right? He came onto the scene in UFC after winning titles in 2 divisions at 1 championship, and he won his first 4 fights in less than a year. He upset former champion Robert Whittaker by split decision. And sometimes it's him landing, meaning RDR, some crazy exotic strikes that you don't see coming. But if you can make De Ridder have to fight with his technique and skill over a more freestyle, you can expose his limitations. And ultimately, that's why Borralho is the betting favorite right here. He's the cleaner striker. He may even be all around the better actual grappler, even though RDR is more known for scoring big-time submissions out of nowhere. This is Borralho's fight to lose. And while both are coming off of big losses that ended their respective runs that could have put them literally in a title shot with a breakthrough performance last year, let's not forget this. Borralho was very competitive in his loss to Nasruddin Imavov, whereas RDR got criticism, as you mentioned off the top, for quitting on his stool and exhausting himself against a late replacement opponent in Brendan Allen. So certainly a lot for both to prove, a lot of motivation, but Borralho, the more well-rounded fighter who seems to have the opportunity easier to bounce back with a big win. Still, you got to go out there and get it done, and that's why all eyes are on Saturday's co-main event.
So, BC, do you think Borralho needs a finish, or if he drags this out, another slow burn, a suffocating decision, does that cement him as a dark horse in the division? Which outcome would?
He just needs a solid victory. Look, this is a 3-round co-main event, not a 5-round fight. In some ways, a shorter fight could favor RDR, who could throw caution to the wind and really look to put on the type of unorthodox pressure that he does to set up situations where he can win. But like we've established here, Borralho's takedown defense, his ability on the ground, his background in jiu-jitsu and judo should be able to nullify that. I like Borralho to win this fight over the distance. I don't think he ultimately needs a finish. And look, when Borralho's at his best, he's not going out of his way to look for that finish. He's instead looking to land clean, heavy shots in the right spots and not get hit in return. For Borralho, at age 33, he's still very much in the top 10 and right now on the outskirts of this title picture, but a victory would certainly catapult him right back in there. Of course, you've got Khamzat Chimaev as the champion, Imavov as the top contender, Sean Strickland just had a breakthrough win over Fluffy Hernandez to reinsert his name. Caio Borralho with a win could do just that, either be looking at a title shot next or a #1 contender fight to get him right back in there if he can defeat RDR on Saturday.
Certainly a lot to look forward to, BC. We appreciate it as we break down Borralho and RDR facing off in that co-main event, the middleweight bout, as part of UFC 326. That is all going down Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern from Las Vegas, and you can watch it exclusively on CBS and Paramount+.
The co-main event for UFC 326 is about between two top 8 ranked UFC middleweights, Caio Borralho versus Reinier de Ridder. And for RDR, he's coming off his first UFC loss after a 4-0 start. And de Ridder sat down with our Shaq Missouri this week and talked about that loss.
I just ran my body in the ground.
That's all?
I did way too much, way too many fights, and I put a lot of time after the fight figuring out what was wrong with me, and I've tried to address all of those points. And well, it's crazy to just have your body back again. It's so nice. Yeah.
Coming off of that fight with Brendan Allen, you know, not making out for the subsequent round, you had a lot of people online, even some other fighters, sort of labeling you a quitter. What was it like for you to be seeing and hearing that feedback towards you, towards your corner?
I didn't really see that feedback, to be honest.
Well,
But
sorry to inform you, Reinier. Most people are saying you're a quitter.
You guys. No, yeah, I understand. It's not something I'm proud of that I didn't make it all the way, but I'm very proud of the decision my coach made. He saw that I wasn't there, and was ballsy for him to do what he did, I think, to take matters into his hands. Just, it's unfortunate, but I didn't have any energy, full collapse. It happened the way it happened, and it put me on this track of getting back to full health, and hopefully I'll be able to show off that I'm still there. I got my body back this Saturday.
And with that, we welcome in CBS Sports Combat Insider Brian Campbell, BC. We just heard from RDR about him getting back to full strength. How would you assess his mindset coming into this fight?
Yeah, I love the humility and what he's talked about. And he's gone even deeper this fight week when talking about that key loss to Brendan Allen last October, and even said that he had low red blood cell count. He was battling anemia. It's something that he's dealt with throughout his career. So to hear him sort of understand why his body fell apart physically and he had such a disappointing loss in that fight that theoretically could have lifted him to a title shot. The one thing he did pinpoint was just too much activity in a short period of time. Look, RDR was considering retirement following a run in one championship where he won titles in 2 divisions, tried to actually win a title in the 3rd division at heavyweight, and came up unsuccessful. He ended up making a run into the UFC, but that fight against Brendan Allen was his 5th in just a 12-month period, which is just incredible, the amount of training that needs to go on to essentially be in a full-time year-long training camp to keep that up. What we saw out of de Ridder during that stretch was he kind of became this wild card of the division, a de facto title contender who on any given night could overachieve and absolutely look like a future champion. Unfortunately for him against Allen, like we talked about, he not only came up empty, he completely fell apart. But to hear him here for the first time there, that it did feel like the critics turned on him. It does feel like now he has a reason and an understanding of why. So that makes him a very interesting underdog coming into Saturday.
Yeah, definitely probably has a chip on his shoulder after the way things ended against Brendan Allen. Now he's back to full strength, and he's going to need all of it versus his opponent. But before we dive into the matchup deeply, BC, what makes him such a dangerous fighter, and what sparked that win streak prior to that loss?
Sure. Well, I mean, first and foremost, he's huge for the division. 6'4", muscular, long limbs, and that all sets up his greatest strength, which is his submission threat. He considers himself among the best grapplers on this planet. He doesn't hide his game plan. He's going to come in there and do anything he can to get you to the ground and try to grab an arm, try to grab a leg. How he gets there, though, is interesting. Look, RDR can be a Jekyll and Hyde type fighter. What I mean by that is his UFC debut, he submitted Gerald Meerschaert but got battered throughout that fight. No one felt like he looked like a future title contender. And then suddenly 3 wins later, he's taking a split decision against Robert Whittaker, a former champion and a living legend. And what RDR was able to do in some of these fights is that even though his striking is not traditionally strong in the orthodox sense, He's long, he's aggressive, he's wild and weird, and he'll jump in with a knee that you don't see coming. He'll jump in with looping strikes from the outside. He's been able to almost hide the fact that he doesn't have a well-rounded striking game, but still keep it unorthodox and dangerous enough. And in the end, all it does is try to set up his goal, which is to take you to the ground. He has a variety of different trips from the clinch that he can do to pull you down there. It's pretty much game over when he puts you, though, in a compromising spot on the ground. It's just how he gets there is interesting. He can be a little bit flaky at times. He also can be there to be hit too often. But when he's on his game, he's sort of this wild card that you really don't know how good he really can be. It's really sort of a rare thing where he's a specialist, a one-dimensional fighter who has somehow been able to make it work to the point where he's a tough out against anyone, including the champion, Khamzat Chimaev, should he get that far.
Yeah, he definitely keeps everybody on their toes. And when we talk about Borralho, he's coming off his first loss in over 10 years, and he's ranked 4th among active middleweights when it comes to significant strike defense. So how does de Ridder match up against this guy, man?
It's interesting. De Ridder's going to have to be the best version of himself by far, right? The same guy who went in there against Robert Whittaker and was so confident and was throwing crazy strikes at him. And the reason is the unorthodox path is the only path here for RDR to get the fight where he needs to against Borralho. And the reason is Caio is such a strong striker, a southpaw who negotiates range perfectly, has a high significant striking average percentage in terms of that, doesn't overcommit, doesn't put himself in positions to be hit, has quick feet, can bounce in and out. But even more important than that is Caio Borralho is a better all-around grappler than RDR. His foundation is in judo, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling. And really for RDR, it's going to have to be, yes, we need to get this fight to the ground, which is difficult considering Borralho stuffed 76% of takedown attempts against him. But to do that, he's got to make it a weird and wild fight. I know Borralho looks like a killer with the tattoos on his throat, but he is a very technical and very smart striker. Over 3 rounds, if he's allowed to pick RDR apart from the outside, this won't be competitive. De Ridder's got to use those long limbs, use the unpredictability, and believe this time that his gas tank will be there in ways that it wasn't when he was going through those health issues against Brendan Allen. If we know he's got that full tank, and remind you, this is only a 3-round fight, not a 5-round fight, it does raise the wild card potential here of RDR if he can get Borralho off his game plan by walking in the room and making it crazy.
Yeah, making it crazy. That's something that we like here on CBS Sports HQ and in the Octagon. And funny you mentioned the grappling part because de Ridder, he doesn't believe, Borralho is amazing at anything. He actually said he's not the greatest grappler, right? He's not the greatest knockout artist, but he is measured. So he did give him credit there, but not totally blown away by anything he does. When we think about how this could catapult de Ridder, right, back to where he wants to be, what's at stake for him, BC?
I think this is almost like a winner-go-home fight among top 10 contenders. And that doesn't mean lose in, you're cut from the promotion. What it means is a victory here can bounce either fighter directly back into that core title picture, which includes, of course, new champion Khamzat Chimaev, #1 contender Nasruddin Imavov there. You got the former champion Dricus du Plessis. And then also you can't forget about Sean Strickland, who just had a breakthrough victory there against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. The thing about RDR that UFC matchmakers love, he'll fight anybody at any time. He'll turn around quick. 4 victories in his first 9 months as a UFC fighter tell you that. 5 appearances in 12 months tell you that. And even coming off of a medical issue against Brendan Allen, here he is 5 months later back in another big fight. Nobody wants to lose 2 in a row, a type of loss that could take the loser of this fight out of that top 10, top 15 contention. But for RDR, one thing you have to remember is this. A new champion is in this division, Khamzat Chimaev, and he won that title by absolutely dominating the former champion Dricus du Plessis with grappling. When you look up and down this roster and really say who can give Chimaev trouble, RDR is one of the rare names that you have to mention because that jiu-jitsu game is 10 out of 10 in terms of quality and the confidence that de Ridder has that no matter who he's in against, how great their striking is, He's going to get the fight to the floor, and he's going to show you why he's dangerous. That's why we say he's a dark horse, a wild card. He can look bad on any given night. He can also upset his way to the title picture, which is where he'll be if he can get by Caio Borralho on Saturday.
All right, it'll be great action, and BC will be in studio to break it all down. Cannot wait. Thanks so much, man. And you can watch UFC 326 this Saturday on Paramount Plus. Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira face off for the BMF title. The main card starts at 9 p.m. Eastern. Watch exclusively on Paramount Plus without the pay-per-view price tag.